The silence in the elegant Napa Valley dining room felt physical, pressing against my eardrums as I stared at the financial documents spread before me. A single wine glass, half-empty Merlot catching the chandelier light, sat as the only witness to my discovery. 3 tables away, Andrew chatted with his family, oblivious that I'd stepped away to take what I'd told them was an urgent client call. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Wilson? The hotel, concierge asked, hovering uncertainly near my secluded corner table. I looked up, my fingers still tracing the unmistakable electronic signature on the transfer documents. My signature. One I had never authorized. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane building inside my chest. Actually, yes. Could you please call me a separate car? I won't be joining the Wilson family for the remainder of dinner. The man nodded discreetly and disappeared. I gathered the papers, my mind racing through calculations. 2 years of meticulous accounting work at my firm. Nearly $3.7 million in corporate assets, all transferred systematically to Wilson Auxiliary Holdings, my brother-in-law Daniel's shell company. I saw Andrew throw his head back in laughter at something his mother said. Patricia Wilson's birthday celebration was going perfectly. The vineyard tour, the private wine tasting, the 7-course dinner prepared by a celebrity chef. I had arranged it all, leveraging my professional connections, insisting on paying despite Patricia's token protests. I stood, smoothed my burgundy dress, and walked directly toward the exit, not toward their table. Andrew noticed, his smile faltering as he made eye contact across the room. I didn't stop, not when he called my name, not when he followed me into the lobby, his voice rising with each step. Where are you going? Jessica, what's wrong? We haven't even had dessert. Mom's cake is coming out. I turned to face my husband of 6 years, the man whose financial empire I had helped build with my expertise, my connections, my trust. The man who had betrayed me so thoroughly the evidence still burned in my handbag. Your mother can have her cake, Andrew, but she'll have to eat it without me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And you might want to enjoy that $900 bottle of Cabernet while you can. Starting tomorrow morning, all Wilson family accounts will be frozen pending a full forensic audit. The color drained from his face as understanding dawned. Jess, whatever you think you found, what I found, Andrew, was the audit trail. I held up my phone displaying the PDF I'd just been sent. Every illegal transfer, every forged signature, every redirect to Daniel's accounts. I stepped out into the cool California evening as my waiting car pulled up. Through the glass doors, I could see Andrew frozen in the hotel lobby, phone already pressed to his ear. As the car pulled away, I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, but the chains of manipulation I hadn't even realized were binding me. For the first time in years, despite losing possibly everything, I could breathe. I wasn't always Jessica Wilson, financial consultant to Portland's elite. 6 years ago, I was just Jessica Calloway, founder of Evergreen Financial Consulting, a boutique firm that had grown from my spare bedroom into a respected presence in the Pacific Northwest. I had built my reputation on integrity and an almost preternatural ability to spot financial irregularities before they became problems. You're like a bloodhound for bad bookkeeping, my first major client had told me after I'd saved his small tech company from a tax disaster. That reputation brought me increasingly prominent clients, including several venture capital firms and family offices managing old Portland money. That's how I met Andrew Wilson. He was the golden son of Wilson Investment Group, a third-generation wealth management firm with offices overlooking the Willamette River. Handsome, with sandy brown hair always perfectly styled and blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, Andrew carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about making rent. I was conducting an efficiency audit for one of the Wilson Group's clients when Andrew first approached me, leaning against my temporary desk with 2 coffee cups in hand. Black with 1 sugar, right? I noticed that's how you take it during the morning meetings. I looked up, surprised not just by the coffee but by the gesture. In my experience, the Wilsons weren't known for noticing the preferences of people they considered service providers. "You've been watching me?" I asked, accepting the cup. "Professional curiosity," he replied with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "You're doing something different with the Bergman portfolio analysis. My father claims it's unnecessarily detailed, but I think it's brilliant." That was Andrew's talent, making you feel seen in a world where most financial professionals blended into the background. Over the following weeks, our professional interactions evolved into lunch meetings, then dinner dates. I was cautious. Office romances were complicated enough without adding in a client relationship, but Andrew was persuasive. "My family's firm isn't your client," he reasoned. "The Bergmans are. And anyway, I'm not looking for financial advice, just the pleasure of your company." 3 months later, he invited me to the Wilson family's annual summer gala at their Lake Oswego estate. Patricia Wilson, elegant in tailored navy blue, assessed me with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to appraising assets. "Jessica, Andrew tells us you're quite the financial wizard," she said, air-kissing near my cheek. "Self-made success is so enterprising." Robert Wilson, Andrew's father, was more direct. "Callaway? I don't recognize the name. Are you related to the Callaways from Seattle?" "No relation that I know of," I answered. "My father was a high school math teacher. My mother worked in retail." "How grounding," Patricia murmured, already looking past me to greet another guest. When Andrew proposed 6 months later, the warning signs were there. His parents' tepid response to our engagement. The prenuptial agreement with clauses about business asset protections that my lawyer advised against signing. But I was in love. And more than that, I believed I had found someone who valued my professional accomplishments as much as I did his. Our wedding was a study in compromise. The Wilsons wanted a society event at the Arlington Club. I wanted something more personal. We settled on a garden ceremony at a historic estate, with a guest list that awkwardly merged Portland's financial elite with my college friends and the small number of family members I had maintained relationships with after leaving my small hometown in Eastern Oregon. Throughout the ceremony, I caught glimpses of Patricia's tight smile as she watched my best friend Sam give a maid of honor speech that referenced our broke college days. Daniel, Andrew's older brother, barely concealed his boredom during the entire event, except when networking with potential clients. The first 2 years of our marriage were good, or so I thought. Andrew seemed to respect my determination to maintain Evergreen Financial as my own entity, separate from Wilson Investment Group, though he frequently suggested merging resources for efficiency. My business continued to grow. I hired 2 junior consultants and an operations manager. We moved into new offices in the Pearl District, and my client list expanded beyond Portland to Seattle and San Francisco. Meanwhile, I was being steadily incorporated into Wilson family events, charity galas, holiday gatherings, monthly dinners at Robert and Patricia's home. Each time, I felt the subtle undermining of my professional identity. "Jessica has such a good mind for details," Patricia would tell her friends. "She's terribly helpful with all our accounts now. Almost like having a personal accountant in the family." Andrew never contradicted these diminishments. "That's just Mom," he would say later. "She means well. She's proud of you in her way." The real trouble began 3 years into our marriage, when I started noticing discrepancies in our joint accounts. Nothing major at first, transfers that didn't match our spending, investment movements I didn't recall authorizing. When I mentioned it to Andrew, he brushed it off. "That's probably just the automatic rebalancing we set up. Remember when we..." talked about optimizing our portfolio allocations. I did remember those conversations, but not agreeing to any changes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Still, I was busy expanding Evergreen to Vancouver, and I let it slide, making a mental note to review our accounts more carefully when I had time. Then came the Patterson account. Juliet Patterson was a tech executive who had recently sold her startup for $18 million. She came to me specifically for help setting up a financial structure independent of her husband's family business. I need someone who understands what it's like to maintain your own identity while being connected to a family enterprise, she told me during our initial consultation. I worked for weeks on a comprehensive plan for her: tax optimization, investment, strategy, philanthropic planning. The day before our final presentation, Andrew asked to see my work. The Pattersons are connected to the Drummond family, he explained. They're major Wilson Group clients. I just want to make sure we're not creating any conflicts. I showed him the plan, emphasizing that Juliet wanted her finances kept separate from the Pattersons and Drummonds. He nodded thoughtfully, made a few suggestions, and that was that. Or so I thought. The next morning, I received a call from Juliet canceling our meeting. She had decided to go with Wilson Investment Group instead. Daniel made me an offer yesterday, she explained, sounding apologetic. He showed me a plan that was remarkably similar to what you had outlined, but with some additional family office services. My stomach dropped. Did he happen to mention that he's my brother-in-law? No, Juliet said, clearly surprised. He presented it as something his team had developed based on their understanding of my situation. I confronted Andrew that evening. He was apologetic, but defensive. Daniel was already working with the Drummonds. It makes sense for them to keep Juliet's business in the same firm. It's nothing personal, just business. He used my work, Andrew, my intellectual property. Work I showed you in confidence. Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. Jessica, we're family. In family businesses, ideas flow freely. You should consider it a compliment that Daniel recognized the quality of your work. Despite my misgivings, I tried to accept this explanation. After all, the Wilsons had welcomed me into their family. Perhaps this was simply how they operated, with more fluid boundaries than I was accustomed to in my independent practice. What I didn't realize was that the Patterson situation wasn't an isolated incident, but the beginning of a pattern. Over the next year, 3 more potential clients mysteriously ended up signing with Wilson Investment Group after initial consultations with me. Each time, Andrew had some explanation about existing relationships or comprehensive service offerings that Evergreen couldn't match. Then came the suggestion that would change everything. You should let me help you with Evergreen's accounting, Andrew offered one evening as I reviewed my quarterly financials. You're spending too much time on administrative details when you could be focusing on client acquisition. I have an accounting team, I reminded him. Garcia Financial has handled my books since I started the company. And they charge you a fortune, Andrew countered. I could set you up with Wilson Group's system. We have the infrastructure already in place. It would save you thousands each month. The proposal made business sense. The Wilson Group did have sophisticated financial systems that would be expensive for Evergreen to replicate. And with my client base expanding, I was stretched thin. After consulting with my business partner Alicia, who had reservations but ultimately deferred to my judgment, I agreed to the transition. For 6 months, everything seemed fine. Our expenses decreased, our reporting became more streamlined, and I was able to focus on growing the business. Evergreen landed 2 major clients, a regional hospital system and a clean energy investment fund, bringing our assets under advisement to over $200 million. Then came the call from Trevor Garcia. Jessica, I know you moved your accounting services to your husband's firm, but I wanted to check on something unusual. One of our mutual clients mentioned that Evergreen is now operating as a subsidiary of Wilson Auxiliary Holdings. Is that accurate? I felt my blood run cold. No, that's absolutely not accurate. Evergreen is an independent firm. We have no subsidiaries or parent companies. That's what I thought, Trevor said. But there's paperwork being circulated with your electronic signature showing a reorganization. I thought you should know. As soon as I hung up, I began investigating. What I found sent me into a spiral of disbelief, then rage. Over the past year, Andrew had been systematically transferring Evergreen's assets, client contracts, and intellectual property to Wilson Auxiliary Holdings, a subsidiary managed solely by his brother Daniel. The paper trail was cleverly disguised. Within the accounting system Andrew had convinced me to adopt. Buried in monthly reports were evidence of the transfers, each bearing an electronic signature that matched mine, but that I had never authorized. Even more disturbing, I found emails between Andrew and Daniel discussing how to integrate Jessica's business without triggering her independence concerns. I confronted Andrew that night. His initial denial crumbled when I showed him the documents I'd found. "It's not what you think," he insisted. "We're protecting the assets. The market is volatile, and Daniel has a structure that shields everything from potential downturns." By stealing my company? Assets I built before I even met you? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Not stealing, consolidating. Jessica, be reasonable. We're talking about family resources. Evergreen is not a family resource. It's my company, my name, my reputation." Andrew's expression hardened. "A reputation built partly through your connection to the Wilson name. Do you think you would have landed half those clients without the credibility our family provided?" The argument escalated until Andrew stormed out, claiming I was being hysterically protective of a business that would ultimately benefit from Wilson Group's management. I spent the night reviewing every financial document I could access, building a clearer picture of what had happened. By morning, I had discovered enough to know I needed professional help. I called Mark Henderson, a lawyer specialized in financial fraud who had been recommended by Sam years earlier. "Just in case you ever need someone not connected to the Wilsons." Mark's assessment was blunt. "This is textbook corporate theft. Jessica, the electronic signatures, the hidden transfers, the parallel authority structures, classic techniques for siphoning assets." "From strangers, maybe," I said. "But we're married. He's my husband." "Which makes it personal betrayal on top of financial fraud," Mark replied. "The good news is the audit trail is clear. The bad news is untangling this will be messy, especially with family involved." On Mark's advice, I began quietly documenting everything while appearing to continue business as usual. We were scheduled to attend Patricia Wilson's 60th birthday celebration in Napa Valley the following weekend, a 3-day extravaganza that Andrew insisted we couldn't miss despite our ongoing tension. "Mom's been planning this for months," he said. "Everyone will be there. It would look strange if we canceled." I agreed to go, recognizing the opportunity to gather more information. If Andrew and Daniel had been brazen enough to steal my business, what else might the Wilsons be? Hiding? The first day in Napa Valley unfolded exactly as Patricia had planned. A private tour of exclusive wineries, lunch at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and dinner at the luxury resort where the entire family was staying. I smiled through it all, playing the role of devoted daughter-in-law while observing the Wilson family dynamics with new eyes. Daniel was particularly attentive, asking pointed questions about Evergreen's newest clients. "I heard the Mackenzie Foundation is looking for new financial advisement. They'd be perfect for your approach." Nodded pleasantly. "They would. I have a meeting with their board next month. Perhaps I should join you," he suggested. "The Mackenzies and I go way back." "I'll let you know if I need an introduction," I replied, noting how he frowned at my independence. That evening, while Andrew was in a private whiskey tasting with His father and uncles. I used his laptop to check my email. He had left it logged into his account. There, in his inbox, was a message from Daniel with the subject line, JW Assets Final Phase. Attached was a document outlining the complete absorption of Evergreen Financial into Wilson Auxiliary Holdings, scheduled to be announced at a press conference the following week. I was still reeling from this discovery when Andrew returned to our suite. I quickly switched screens, pretending to review the itinerary for the next day. "Dad wants us to join him for breakfast tomorrow," Andrew said, loosening his tie. "Something about discussing the future direction of the family businesses." "All of them, including Evergreen?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. A flicker of unease crossed his face. "The Wilson Group entities primarily, but yes, I suppose Evergreen's integration would come up." Integration. I repeated the word slowly. "That's an interesting choice of term for what you and Daniel have been doing." Andrew's expression shifted from unease to wariness. "Jessica, it's late. Let's not get into business discussions now. When would be a better time? After the press conference next week?" His eyes widened slightly, confirmation that I had found something I wasn't supposed to know. But rather than confessing, he switched tactics. "You're overreacting to standard business consolidation. If you'd studied finance at a top program instead of getting your degree from a state school, you'd understand these structures are normal in family enterprises." The condescension in his voice, something that had always been present, but that I had chosen to ignore, crystallized everything for me. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about respect, about seeing me as an equal partner rather than an asset to be managed. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. By morning, I had formulated a plan. During the day's activities, a hot air balloon ride followed by a picnic lunch, I excused myself several times to make calls. To Mark Henderson, to Alicia Martinez, to Sam Taylor, to my banking contacts. Each call set another piece of my counteroffensive in motion. That evening was Patricia's formal birthday dinner at the resort's acclaimed restaurant. I dressed carefully in a burgundy sheath dress I knew she admired, applied flawless makeup, and joined the family gathering with a pleasant smile firmly in place. During cocktails, I received a text from Mark. "Documents received. Proceeding. As discussed." Then another from Alicia. "Emergency protocols activated. All secure." Just before we were to be seated for dinner, I asked the concierge if I could use a private room for a confidential client call. He escorted me to a small conference room adjacent to the restaurant. There, waiting in my email, was what I had been building toward all day: the complete audit trail of every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every communication between Andrew and Daniel about the systematic theft of my company. Most damning of all was evidence that Wilson Investment Group itself was in financial trouble, using Evergreen's assets and client relationships to shore up losses from several failed ventures. The Wilsons weren't just stealing my business, they were trying to save their own. Which brings us back to that moment of clarity in the Napa Valley dining room. The moment when I decided that the Wilson family would no longer define my worth or control my future. As I left the restaurant in my separate car, the emotional weight of what was happening finally hit me. My hands shook against the leather seat as we drove through the darkened vineyards. 6 years of marriage, 8 years building my company. All of it compromised in ways I was only beginning to understand. I directed the driver to take me not to the resort where the Wilsons were staying, but to a boutique hotel in downtown Napa that I had secretly booked earlier that day. I needed space to think, to plan, to prepare for what would undoubtedly be the fight of my professional life. The hotel room was simple but elegant, a far cry from the opulent suite I'd left behind. I kicked off my heels, opened my laptop, and began the process that Mark Henderson had outlined for me hours earlier. First, I logged into the secure server where we had been building a parallel record of Evergreen Financial's legitimate operations. For the past 3 weeks, ever since finding the first evidence of Andrew's betrayal, I had been secretly duplicating all client data, contracts, and communications onto this independent system. Alicia had helped me establish it, using her background in cybersecurity to ensure it couldn't be traced back to my work computer or home network. "Everything's ready," Alicia had told me during our last call. "The moment you give the word, we initiate Operation Clean Slate." It was a dramatic name for what was essentially a company reset, cutting all financial ties to Wilson Investment Group and Wilson Auxiliary Holdings, reverting to our independent banking relationships, and notifying clients of attempted corporate espionage that had been caught and neutralized. I stared at the email draft we had prepared. Once sent, there would be no going back. The Wilsons would know exactly what I had discovered and what I was doing in response. It would mean war, legal, financial, and personal. My phone buzzed continuously, with texts and calls from Andrew. I ignored them all, instead calling Sam, who answered immediately despite the late hour. "Are you okay?" she asked without preamble. "I'm executing the plan," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've left Andrew and the family at the restaurant. I'm at the backup hotel." "Good. What do you need from me?" Sam had never fully trusted Andrew. As my oldest friend, she had seen the subtle ways his family had tried to diminish me, even before I recognized the pattern myself. When I finally confided in her about the financial irregularities, she had been the one to connect me with both Mark Henderson and a forensic accountant who specialized in cases of corporate theft. "Can you go to my house?" I asked. "There are files in the hidden safe in my office, original incorporation documents, client contracts predating my marriage, my grandmother's jewelry. The combination is your grandmother's birthday and the year you started Evergreen." "I remember," Sam interrupted. "I'll get everything tonight." "Be careful," I warned. "Andrew might go there when he realizes I'm not coming back to the resort." "Let him try," Sam said with characteristic fierceness. "I'll have Logan with me." Logan, her brother, was a former military police officer who now worked in private security. After hanging up, I called Mark Henderson. "I found the final pieces," I told him. "Not just the transfer of Evergreen's assets, but evidence that Wilson Investment Group is in serious financial trouble. They're using my company to shore up their losses." "That changes the calculation," Mark said, his voice taking on the focused tone I'd come to associate with his strategic thinking. "If the whole Wilson enterprise is unstable, we need to move faster than we planned. They might get desperate." He was right. Financial desperation made people unpredictable. If the Wilsons realized I knew about both the theft of my company and their broader financial problems, they might take extreme measures. "What about the injunction?" I asked. "I can file first thing tomorrow morning. Judge Winters is on the bench. She's handled similar cases before and doesn't have any connections to the Wilson family that I'm aware of." "Do it," I said. "And let's activate everything else we discussed." "Are you sure, Jessica? Once we pull these triggers, there's no de-escalation path." I thought about Andrew's face in the hotel lobby, the shock giving way to calculation. I thought about Daniel's smug confidence when discussing my clients. I thought about Patricia's condescension that had masked years of planning to absorb my success into the Wilson family narrative. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "They tried to take everything from me. They don't get to walk away from that." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and composed a new email to the emergency address we had established. The message was simple. Green light on clean slate. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising. I pressed send, then sat back, oddly calm despite having just launched a business counteroffensive that would send shockwaves through Portland's financial community. My phone rang again, Andrew for the 12th time. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. "You've embarrassed my entire family, walking out on my mother's birthday dinner without explanation." "I think we both know why I left, Andrew," I replied coolly. How's Daniel doing? Has he realized yet that his access to Evergreen's systems has been revoked? There was a moment of silence, then, "What have you done?" "What I should have done weeks ago when I first discovered what you were doing. I've protected my company, my clients, my assets." "Jessica, you're making a terrible mistake. Whatever you think you know, I know everything," I cut him off. "Every transfer, every forged signature, every email between you and Daniel planning how to strip my company from me, and most interestingly, the real state of Wilson Investment Group's finances. How long have you been insolvent, Andrew? Does your mother know her birthday extravaganza is being funded with the last of the family's liquid assets?" Another silence, longer this time. When Andrew spoke again, his voice had changed, the anger replaced by something that might have been respect if it wasn't overshadowed by calculation. "We should talk about this in person. We're family, Jessica. Whatever issues exist, we can work them out together. We stopped being family the moment you decided my life's work was just another Wilson asset to be manipulated," I replied. "And we're well beyond talking. Check your email in about 3 minutes. You'll understand exactly where we stand." I ended the call and blocked his number. Then I sent a text to Patricia Wilson. "I apologize for missing the remainder of your birthday dinner. Unfortunately, I've discovered your son's attempt to illegally seize my company. Consider my departure this evening both from your celebration and from the Wilson family. Do enjoy the cake." I blocked her number too, along with Daniel's and Robert's. Then I opened my work email and watched as the automated system began sending out the carefully crafted notices we had prepared. To all Evergreen clients, notification of attempted corporate interference detected and neutralized. Assurances of continued independent operation and security of their assets. Invitation to direct consultations to address any concerns. To our banking partners, formal notice of separation from Wilson Investment Group, revocation of all Wilson-related signatories, and activation of our independent banking protocols. To key industry regulators, preliminary notice of potential financial irregularities at Wilson Investment Group, with detailed evidence to follow through proper channels. And finally, to all Evergreen employees, explanation of the situation, assurance of job security, and activation of our emergency operations protocol, which would bring everyone into the office tomorrow, Saturday, for a full briefing. By midnight, my phone was blowing up with responses, clients expressing concern but also support, employees confirming they would be in the office the next day, and most notably, a call from Benjamin Winters, CEO of Pacific Northwest Trust, and one of Wilson Investment Group's oldest clients. "Jessica, I've just received your email," he said when I answered. "Are you telling me that Wilson Group is facing insolvency?" "I have evidence suggesting severe financial irregularities, Mr. Winters," I replied carefully. "I believe that's why. They attempted to appropriate my company's assets and client relationships. I felt you should be informed given your long relationship with the firm." "I appreciate that." His voice was grave. "Robert Wilson has been my financial advisor for 20 years. If what you're saying is true, I have documentation," I assured him. "I wouldn't make such claims without substantial evidence. I'd like to see it. First thing tomorrow. I'll be in Portland by noon. I can meet you at my office at 2. After hanging up, I allowed myself a moment of vindication. Benjamin Winters was not just any client. He was the patriarch of one of Oregon's wealthiest families and a board member of 3 major regional banks. His support, or even just his concern, would lend significant credibility to my position. I spent the next few hours organizing documents, responding to urgent messages, and preparing for my return to Portland. At 3:17 a.m., an email arrived from Andrew, sent from his personal account rather than his Wilson Group address. "Jessica, what you've done tonight is both professionally and personally destructive. You've acted on incomplete information and misunderstandings that could have been clarified if you'd bothered to discuss your concerns with me directly. The restructuring of Evergreen under Wilson Auxiliary Holdings was meant to provide tax benefits and liability protection for both entities. Daniel's expertise in organizational structure would have enhanced, not diminished, what you've built. As for the Wilson Group's finances, you've misinterpreted standard investment positions as financial distress. This is exactly why major financial decisions should be left to those with proper training and generational experience in wealth management. I've consulted with our legal team. They believe your actions constitute breach of fiduciary duty and possibly corporate espionage, given that you've removed confidential data from Wilson-managed systems. They're preparing injunctions as I write this. This can still be resolved privately. Come back to the resort in the morning. We'll have breakfast with my parents and Daniel and discuss a path forward that preserves both our marriage and your role at Evergreen under the Wilson umbrella. If you choose to continue this reckless course, understand that you're not just fighting me, but the entire Wilson legacy and all the resources that come with it. Think carefully about your next move. Andrew. I read the email twice, noting the subtle shifts between conciliation and threat, the condescension barely masked by reasonableness. It was classic Andrew, and exactly why I had spent 3 weeks preparing my response rather than confronting him immediately when I found the first evidence of betrayal. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Mark Henderson with a single comment, as predicted, proceeding as planned. Then I tried to sleep for a few hours before my early flight back to Portland. Despite the emotional turmoil, I drifted off quickly, perhaps because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to belong in a family that had never truly accepted me. I woke to news that the financial world was already responding to the unfolding drama. A contact at the Portland Business Journal texted me a screenshot of a breaking news alert. Wilson Investment Group faces questions amid rumors of financial irregularities. Emergency board meeting called. My phone showed 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages, mostly from unknown numbers, likely Wilson family members, associates, and lawyers calling from alternate phones to bypass my blocks. I ignored them, all checking out of the hotel and taking a car to the Napa County Airport where a chartered plane was waiting, another contingency we had arranged. During the flight back to Portland, I received confirmation that Mark Henderson had successfully filed for an emergency injunction preventing Wilson Investment Group or any of its subsidiaries from accessing Evergreen Financial's systems, client, data, or accounts. Judge Winters had granted the order based on the preliminary evidence we'd provided. Alicia met me at the Portland airport, her normally cheerful face serious as she handed me a coffee and a tablet displaying the latest developments. "The office is ready," she said as we walked to her car. "Everyone's there. Sam dropped off the files from your home safe, and the forensic accounting team has already started their formal review." "Any physical attempt to access our office?" I asked. The possibility of Daniel or another Wilson representative trying to enter Evergreen's premises had been one of my concerns. "2 attempts," Alicia confirmed. Daniel showed up at 7 a.m. with some legal papers, claiming he had authority as the new managing director. Security turned him away and documented everything. Then their corporate counsel tried at 9. Same result. I nodded, relieved that our security protocols were working. "And our clients?" Mixed reactions. Most are shocked but supportive. 3 have requested urgent meetings. 4 have received calls from Wilson Group representatives trying to convince them that we're the ones mismanaging their assets. "Predictable," I murmured. "Any sign of Andrew?" "Not at the office, but Sam says he went to your house around 5 a.m. Logan intercepted him. There was some shouting, but no physical confrontation." The thought of Andrew trying to enter what had been our home, perhaps to remove evidence or access, my personal files, sent a chill through me. But I pushed the feeling aside. Today wasn't about emotions. It was about execution. When we arrived at Evergreen Financial's offices, I was greeted by the sight of my entire team gathered in our conference room. 28 people, financial advisors, analysts, client relationship managers, operations staff, all looking to me for explanation and leadership. Many had been with me since the early days, when Evergreen operated out of a converted warehouse, space with secondhand furniture. I took a deep breath and entered the room, setting my bag down at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming in on a Saturday," I began. "I know you've received some concerning communications in the last 12 hours. You deserve the full story, and you deserve it directly from me." For the next 30 minutes, I outlined what had happened: the discovery of unauthorized transfers, the evidence of forgery, the attempt to subsume Evergreen into Wilson Auxiliary Holdings. I explained the emergency measures we had implemented and the legal actions already underway. "The bottom line is this," I concluded. "Evergreen Financial remains independent. Your jobs are secure. Our clients' assets are protected. But we are now in direct conflict with Wilson Investment Group, one of the oldest and most connected financial institutions in the Pacific Northwest. The coming days will be challenging." Jordan Chen, our head of client services, raised his hand. "What are they saying about all this? The Wilsons, I mean." "They're claiming it was a planned restructuring that I misunderstood," I replied. "They're also suggesting that I've breached fiduciary duties by taking these protective measures." "That's ridiculous," said Marcus Jefferson, our senior tax advisor. "We all saw the documentation you showed us. Those signatures were clearly forged. The transfer authorizations were never disclosed to the leadership team." I nodded, grateful for the support. "The evidence is on our side. But evidence alone doesn't win these kinds of battles. The Wilsons have deep connections in this city, with regulators, with other financial institutions, with potential clients. They'll use every advantage." "So what's our strategy?" Alicia asked, though we had already discussed this privately. "Transparency and expertise," I answered. "We contact every client personally. We show them the documentation. We remind them why they chose Evergreen in the first place, for our integrity and our results. And we demonstrate that despite this attempted hostile takeover, we're still delivering on our promises." The meeting transitioned into action planning, assigning client outreach responsibilities, preparing response scripts for various scenarios, and establishing a communication protocol for the coming week. Throughout the discussion, I was struck by the team's commitment. No one questioned whether we should be fighting this battle. They only asked how best to win it. As the meeting concluded and people broke into smaller working groups, I retreated to my office to prepare for my appointment with Benjamin Winters. If we could secure his support, or at least prevent him from fully aligning with the Wilsons, it would significantly strengthen our position. I was reviewing my presentation when my assistant, Taylor, knocked on my door. "Jessica, there's someone here to see you. She says she's Patricia Wilson." My first instinct was to refuse the meeting. Patricia was the last person I wanted to face, right now. But strategic thinking prevailed. Understanding her approach might provide valuable insight into the family's plans. "Give me 2 minutes, then show her in," I replied. I closed my laptop, straightened my desk, and stood. This would not be a conversation where I sat while Patricia stood over me, as had happened so many times at Wilson family gatherings. When she entered, Patricia looked immaculate as always. Tailored pantsuit, pearl earrings, not a hair out of place despite presumably having traveled directly from Napa. Only the tightness around her eyes betrayed any distress. "Jessica," she said, her voice controlled. "This is quite a situation you've created." "That I've created?" I kept my tone level. "Not your sons who forged my signature and attempted to steal my company?" Patricia waved a hand dismissively. "Such dramatic language. Business restructuring always involves complex legal maneuvers. If Andrew failed to adequately explain the process to you, that's unfortunate but hardly criminal." I reached into my desk drawer and withdrew a folder, placing it on the desk between us. Perhaps you'd like to explain these then. Emails between Andrew and Daniel discussing how to transfer Evergreen's assets without my knowledge. Documents with forged signatures. Bank transfers redirecting my company's funds. Patricia didn't touch the folder. Family businesses operate differently than what you might be accustomed to with your independent venture. Resources flow where they're needed. Expertise is applied collectively. Evergreen is not and has never been a Wilson family business, I stated firmly. It's my company, founded before I met Andrew, built with my expertise, my client relationships, my reputation. A reputation significantly enhanced by your connection to the Wilson name, Patricia countered. Let's be honest, Jessica. Many of your most prestigious clients came to you because of your marriage into our family. The Berkmans, the Chungs, the Harrington Foundation, all Wilson connections originally. She wasn't entirely wrong, which made her argument all the more infuriating. My association with the Wilson name had opened certain doors, but what Patricia conveniently ignored was that those clients had stayed with Evergreen because of the quality of our work, not family connections. If those clients came to me because of the Wilson name, they're free to return to Wilson Investment Group, I said. But they won't, because they value Evergreen's approach and results. Patricia's perfectly composed expression flickered with annoyance. You're being short-sighted. This needless conflict is damaging to everyone. The financial community is already buzzing with rumors. Regulatory attention is the last thing any of us need. There it was, the real concern. Not the ethical breach of trying to steal my company, but the potential regulatory scrutiny that might expose other Wilson Group issues. What exactly are you proposing, Patricia? She straightened, clearly relieved to move to negotiation. A reasonable compromise. You withdraw your injunction and your inflammatory communications to clients. We announce a strategic partnership between Evergreen and Wilson Group, with you maintaining operational control of Evergreen as a distinct division. Your client relationships remain intact. Your team stays in place. But the legal structure acknowledges the reality that Evergreen benefits from the Wilson infrastructure and reputation. And the financial transfers that have already occurred? I asked. The client accounts already moved to Wilson Auxiliary Holdings? A temporary measure during restructuring, Patricia said smoothly. Everything can be properly documented retroactively. I studied her for a moment. She truly believed I would accept this, that after discovering their attempted theft, I would willingly hand over control of my company in exchange for the appearance of autonomy. That's an interesting proposal, I said carefully. I have a counteroffer. Wilson Investment Group publicly acknowledges the unauthorized transfers and forgeries. All Evergreen assets, accounts, and client relationships are fully restored to independent status. Your family provides financial restitution for damages to Evergreen's business and reputation, and Andrew and I begin divorce proceedings immediately, with a fair division of marital assets. Patricia's composed facade cracked. Absolutely not. Such admissions would be devastating to the Wilson Group's standing. And divorce, after a minor business disagreement? You're being absurdly vindictive. Attempted theft of my entire company is hardly a minor business disagreement, I replied. And I think we both know my marriage to Andrew has served its purpose in the Wilson family strategy. What are you implying? That Andrew's interest in me was always at least partly about acquiring Evergreen's client base and expertise for the Wilson Group. That you and Robert tolerated me because you saw potential business value. That when my company became successful enough to be worth taking, the plan was always to push me out. Patricia stood, her jaw tight with anger. You've grossly misinterpreted everything about your relationship with our family. Andrew married you because he loved you, despite our concerns about compatibility. We welcomed you, despite your lack of social connections or family background. And this is how you repay that generosity, with accusations and legal maneuvers? I remained standing, meeting her gaze steadily. "I think we're done here, Patricia. Please tell Andrew that any further communication should go through our respective attorneys." "You won't win this fight, Jessica," she said, her voice low and controlled again. "The Wilsons have weathered far worse challenges than an ungrateful daughter-in-law with delusions of corporate independence." As she turned to leave, I couldn't resist one parting comment. "How was the rest of your birthday dinner, by the way? Did they serve the cake after you had to hand over your jewelry as payment?" Patricia stiffened, but didn't turn around. She left without another word, the click of her heels against the hardwood floor punctuating her departure. I sank into my chair, the confrontation leaving me drained but also strangely energized. Patricia's visit had confirmed what I already suspected. The Wilsons were concerned enough about my actions to attempt negotiation, but not remorseful enough to acknowledge the fundamental breach of trust. I had less than an hour before my meeting with Benjamin Winters. I needed to refocus, to prepare for what might be the most important client presentation of my career. But first, I allowed myself a brief moment to acknowledge how far I had come, from the woman who had once been desperate for Patricia Wilson's approval. The Jessica who had entered the Wilson family would have accepted Patricia's compromise, grateful for any recognition of her professional value. But that Jessica no longer existed. In her place stood someone who understood her own worth, someone willing to fight for what she had built, regardless of the powerful forces aligned against her. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "Winters just called. He's bringing his entire financial advisory team to the meeting." The stakes had just been raised. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened my laptop. It was time to prepare for battle. The meeting with Benjamin Winters proved to be everything I'd anticipated and more. He arrived at Evergreen's offices precisely at 2:00, accompanied not just by his financial advisory team, but also by his daughter Catherine, who had recently taken over as CFO of the family's holdings company. Their presence sent a clear message. This wasn't merely a courtesy call, but a serious evaluation of where the Winters family would place their considerable financial trust moving forward. "Jessica," Benjamin greeted me, his handshake firm despite his 70 years. "Let's get straight to the point. I've received concerning calls from both Robert Wilson and yourself. I need to understand what's happening." I led them into our largest conference room where I had prepared a comprehensive presentation. Rather than beginning with accusations against the Wilsons, I started with facts, displaying the original financial structures of Evergreen, the gradual integration of systems with Wilson Group, and then the discovery of unauthorized transfers. "This document," I said, displaying a large projection of a funds transfer authorization, "bears what appears to be my signature authorizing the movement of the Harrington Foundation's $42 million portfolio to Wilson Auxiliary Holdings. However, I was in Singapore on this date, meeting with potential partners for our Asian expansion. I switched to a different screen showing my passport stamps and hotel receipts. I couldn't have physically signed this document." Catherine Winters leaned forward, examining the evidence. With a background in corporate law before joining her family's business, she understood immediately the implications. "Electronic signature fraud," she stated rather than asked. "Exactly," I confirmed, "and not an isolated incident." I displayed a series of similar documents, each showing transfers of Evergreen assets, client portfolios, or intellectual property to Wilson-controlled entities, all bearing signatures I had never authorized. For the next 40 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence we had gathered, careful to stick to verifiable facts rather than assumptions about motives. I explained the financial protection measures I had implemented, the legal actions underway, and the steps we were taking to ensure client assets remained secure. Benjamin Winters listened intently, occasionally asking incisive questions, but otherwise maintaining a poker face that had served him well through decades of high-stakes business negotiations. His team took detailed notes, particularly when I Shared evidence suggesting Wilson Investment Group's broader financial vulnerabilities. You're making serious allegations against one of Portland's oldest financial institutions, Benjamin said finally. Institutions my family has trusted for generations. I understand the gravity of these claims, Mr. Winters, I replied. That's why I've been careful to present only what I can substantiate with documentation. I'm not asking you to take my word over the Wilsons. I'm asking you to evaluate the evidence and draw your own conclusions. Catherine whispered something to her father, who nodded slightly before addressing me again. What are you seeking from us, Jessica? Support in your legal battles with the Wilsons? Public endorsement of Evergreen's independence? A direct question. Deserved a direct answer. Primarily, I wanted you to be fully informed about potential risks to your family's assets. The Wilson Group's apparent financial instability could affect all their clients, including your family. And secondarily? Catherine asked, her legal mind catching my careful wording. Secondarily, yes, your continued confidence in Evergreen would be meaningful, both practically and symbolically. But that must be your independent decision based on your assessment of where your interests are best served. Benjamin exchanged glances with his team before standing. We need to review these materials more thoroughly and conduct our own verification. I appreciate your transparency, Jessica. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. It wasn't the immediate endorsement I might have hoped for, but it was better than an immediate withdrawal of their business. As I escorted them out, Catherine hung back slightly. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I've been concerned about some of Robert Wilson's investment recommendations for months. Too aggressive, too concentrated in certain sectors. My father has been loyal to them for decades, though. This won't be an easy decision for him. After they left, I returned to find Alicia waiting in my office. How did it go? She asked. As well as could be expected. They didn't commit either way, but they're taking the evidence seriously. Alicia nodded. While you were in that meeting, we received 2 interesting developments. First, 3 more Wilson Group clients reached out asking for meetings with us. All major accounts. That was promising. Word was spreading, and people were questioning their relationships with the Wilsons. And second? Andrew's here. He's in the reception area insisting on seeing you. I hadn't expected Andrew to confront me at the office. At our home, perhaps, or through legal channels, but not here. Not at Evergreen's headquarters, where every employee now knew what he had attempted to do. How long has he been waiting? About 20 minutes. Security is watching him. Do you want them to escort him out? I considered my options. Refusing to see Andrew would avoid an uncomfortable confrontation, but it might also reinforce the narrative he was undoubtedly creating, that this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved through direct communication. No, I decided. I'll see him. But I want you and Marcus in the room as witnesses. Alicia raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's necessary? Absolutely. Whatever Andrew says, I want independent verification. He's already shown he's willing to forge documents. I won't give him the opportunity to misrepresent our conversation, too. 5 minutes later, Andrew was shown into our smallest conference room, a deliberate choice on my part. Unlike my office, with its comfortable seating and personal touches, this room was austere, designed for brief vendor meetings rather than client presentations. Andrew looked haggard, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. His suit was slightly rumpled, his hair not perfectly styled as usual. But he still carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected to control the situation. Jessica, he began, his tone conciliatory. This has gotten completely out of hand. We need to talk. Just the 2 of us. He glanced pointedly at Alicia and Marcus, who had positioned themselves against the wall. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my colleagues, I replied. Given recent events, I think we're well past private conversations, don't you? Andrew's expression hardened slightly. This is between us, between husband and wife. Bringing our personal issues into the workplace is unprofessional. Forging my signature to steal my company crossed the line between personal and professional long ago, I countered. But please, say what you came to say. He sighed, then reached into his briefcase and withdrew a folder. Our legal team has prepared this cease and desist order regarding your communications to Wilson Group clients. You're making false statements that are damaging our reputation and business relationships. I didn't touch the folder he placed on the table. What false statements specifically? Your claims of financial irregularities at Wilson Investment Group are completely unfounded, and characterizing the planned integration of Evergreen into our family of companies as theft is both inaccurate and defamatory. Integration? I repeated. Is that what we're calling forgery and unauthorized transfers now? Andrew leaned forward, lowering his voice. Jessica, listen to me. You're making a catastrophic mistake based on incomplete information. Yes, there were some steps taken without your direct authorization, but it was to protect both companies during a sensitive transition period. Protect them from what exactly? He hesitated, and I saw calculation in his eyes. Market volatility, potential regulatory changes, the usual risks in our industry. And those risks required transferring millions in client assets to your brothers. Company without my knowledge? Without client notification? With forged authorizations? The authorizations were procedural necessities that would have been properly documented after the fact, Andrew insisted. Standard practice in complex corporate restructuring. I almost laughed at the audacity. There's nothing standard about what you did. But let's be completely clear. Was the restructuring plan going to maintain Evergreen as an independent entity under my control? Another hesitation. You would have maintained operational oversight of the Evergreen brand within the Wilson Group structure. That's not independence, that's absorption, and my equity position in the company I built from nothing would have been converted to shares in Wilson Auxiliary Holdings, Andrew admitted, with appropriate compensation packages to reflect your contributions. So I would have gone from owner to employee in a company managed by your brother, with no direct control over client relationships or investment strategies. You're oversimplifying. A sophisticated corporate arrangement. I'm a financial consultant with an MBA and 15 years of experience, I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. I understand exactly what you were attempting to do. The question is whether you understand the legal and ethical boundaries you've crossed. Andrew's facade of reasonableness began to crack. The boundaries in family businesses are different. Jessica, you've never understood that. The Wilson name, the Wilson legacy, these things matter more than individual ownership claims. Evergreen is not and has never been a family business in the Wilson sense, I stated firmly. It's my company, built with my expertise, my client relationships, my reputation. A reputation significantly enhanced by your connection to the Wilson name, Andrew countered, echoing his mother's earlier argument almost word for word. Most of your major clients came through Wilson Group introductions or connections. I had prepared for this line of attack. Interesting theory. Let's test it, shall we? I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. Of Evergreen's top 20 clients by assets under management, only 4 came through Wilson connections. The rest were either clients I brought into the marriage or developed independently thereafter. Andrew dismissed this with a wave. That's not the point. It's precisely the point, I cut in. You and your family have consistently undervalued what I've built and overestimated your contribution to Evergreen's success. That fundamental misunderstanding is what led you to believe you could simply appropriate my company. He stared at me for a long moment, then changed tactics. What about our marriage, Jessica? Does that mean nothing to you? 6 years together, thrown away over a business dispute? The appeal to our personal relationship was predictable, but still landed with some emotional force. Despite everything, There had been good times, moments of genuine connection. But they couldn't outweigh the fundamental breach of trust that had occurred. "This isn't just a business dispute," I said quietly. "It's a complete betrayal of trust. You systematically worked to undermine and ultimately steal something you knew was deeply important to me, something that represents my life's work, while simultaneously planning to divorce me once the transfer was complete." Andrew's expression shifted to surprise. "Divorce? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and displayed the email I had discovered. A message from Andrew to the Wilson family attorney discussing separation strategy and optimal timing in relation to the Evergreen integration. "Were you planning to announce it at your mother's birthday dinner?" I asked. "That would have been appropriately dramatic." The color drained from Andrew's face. For once, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. "I think we're done here," I said, standing. "Any further communication should go through our respective attorneys." Andrew recovered his composure quickly. "You've seriously misinterpreted that email. And regardless, your actions in the past 24 hours have violated numerous contractual obligations. My offer to resolve this amicably still stands, but it has a time limit. By end of business Monday, either you begin unwinding these disruptive measures, or the full legal and financial resources of Wilson Investment Group will be deployed against you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check," Andrew replied, gathering his briefcase. "You're one person with a mid-sized company. We're an institution with generations of connections and resources. Consider carefully which path you choose." After he left, Alicia and Marcus exchanged worried glances. "He's not wrong about their resources," Marcus said. "The Wilsons have connections throughout the financial regulatory system in this region. And judges and politicians," Alicia added. "They donate to every major campaign. The Wilson name is on half the charitable foundations in Portland." I had been prepared for intimidation tactics, but hearing the concern in my colleagues' voices made the threat more immediate. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," I acknowledged. "But we also have something the Wilsons don't." "What's that?" Marcus asked. "Actual evidence of financial fraud," I replied. "And in my experience, evidence ultimately matters more than connections." The rest of Saturday passed in a blur of activity. Our team contacted every Evergreen client, explaining the situation and addressing concerns. I had follow-up conversations with Mark Henderson about our legal strategy. By evening, we had confirmation that most of our clients were standing with us, at least for now. A few had expressed uncertainty or asked for time to evaluate the situation. As I prepared to leave the office around 9 p.m., Sam called. "I've got the files from your home office," she reported. "And Logan says everything seems secure at the house, though he spotted someone watching it from a car down the street earlier. Probably hired by Andrew or his father," I said. "Did Logan get a description?" "Better. He got photos and the license plate. I'll send them to you." "Thanks, Sam. You should both get some rest. I don't think Andrew will try anything else." "Tonight?" "Where are you staying?" she asked. "Not at your house, I hope." I had already decided against returning home. "No, I've booked a suite at the Waverly downtown. Security is good, and it's walking distance to the office." "Smart. Want company?" "I could bring dinner." The offer was tempting. After the emotional intensity of the day, normal conversation with my oldest friend sounded wonderful. But I knew I needed time alone to process everything that had happened and prepare for what was coming. "Rain check? I think I need some quiet. Time to think." "Understood. But call if you change your mind, even if it's late." After hanging up, I gathered my things and took the elevator down to the parking garage. As I approached my car, I noticed a white envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. Immediately alert, I looked around the garage but saw no one. I removed the envelope cautiously. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality stationery bearing a handwritten note. "Jessica, this situation has escalated beyond what anyone intended. While I cannot speak for my son's actions, I believe this conflict can still be resolved without mutual destruction. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Arlington Club, private room, just the two of us. There are aspects to this situation of which you remain unaware. After hearing me out, you can proceed as you see fit. Robert Wilson. The note was unexpected. Throughout my marriage to Andrew, Robert Wilson had remained somewhat in the background, allowing Patricia to manage family dynamics while he focused on business matters. He had always been cordial to me but never particularly warm. For him to reach out directly, without lawyers or family members present, was significant. Was it a trap? Possibly. But Robert was known for his strategic pragmatism in business dealings. If Wilson Investment Group truly was in financial trouble, he might be looking for a resolution that minimized further damage. I took a photo of the note and sent it to Mark Henderson with a simple question. Should I go? His response came quickly. Could be valuable intelligence gathering. If you go, record everything. I'll have someone positioned nearby as backup. The following morning, Sunday, I arrived at the Arlington Club 10 minutes early. One of Portland's oldest private clubs, it had been a bastion of the city's business elite since the 1800s. Women had only been allowed as members since the 1990s, a fact Patricia Wilson had often mentioned with pride as she had been among the first female members. I gave my name to the receptionist, who nodded in recognition. Mr. Wilson is already here. Please follow me. She led me through the main dining room, with its dark wood paneling and oil portraits of founding members, to a small private dining room at the back. Robert Wilson stood as I entered, gesturing to a chair across from him at a table already set for breakfast. Jessica, thank you for coming, he said, his voice carrying the slight Southern accent that remained from his Tennessee upbringing despite 50 years in the Pacific Northwest. I appreciate your willingness to meet, despite the current circumstances. Your note suggested you have information I should hear, I replied, remaining standing. I'm listening. Robert indicated the chair again. Please sit. This may take some time to explain properly. I sat, though I remained on guard. A server appeared almost immediately with coffee, then discreetly withdrew, closing the door behind. I'll be direct, Robert began once we were alone. Wilson Investment Group is facing significant challenges that Andrew and Daniel attempted to address through their actions regarding Evergreen. Financial insolvency, I stated, rather than asked. Robert's expression tightened slightly. Not insolvency. Liquidity constraints and investment positions that have underperformed projections. Serious but manageable with the right strategy. And the right strategy included stealing my company? He held up a hand. I don't condone the methods my sons employed. They acted without my explicit approval or knowledge. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. You expect me to believe that Andrew and Daniel orchestrated a complex financial fraud? Without your awareness. When nothing happens at Wilson Group without your sign-off. That was once true, Robert acknowledged, surprising me with his candor. But over the past 2 years, I've been less engaged with day-to-day operations. Health issues primarily, he paused. Patricia and the boys thought it best to keep certain matters within the family rather than worry me or prompt questions about succession planning. This was new information. Robert Wilson's health had never been mentioned in family gatherings. I'd attended. He had always appeared robust despite being in his 70s. What health issues? I asked. Early-stage Parkinson's, diagnosed 18 months ago. Manageable with medication, but progressive. I've been gradually transferring operational control to Andrew and Daniel while maintaining the appearance of full engagement to preserve client confidence. If this was true, it explained some of the timing. Andrew and Daniel's scheme had accelerated. Around the same time, Robert would have been stepping back from direct oversight. I'm sorry about your health, I said, genuinely meaning it despite everything else. But it doesn't excuse what Andrew and Daniel attempted to do. No, it doesn't, Robert agreed. Their approach was wrong, legally and ethically. But the underlying concern driving their actions is real. Wilson Investment Group needs to diversify its service offerings and stabilize its capital position. Evergreen represents exactly the kind of innovative financial consulting that complements our traditional wealth management services. So you're saying they were right to want Evergreen, just wrong in how they went about acquiring it? Robert sipped his coffee before answering. I'm saying there was a legitimate business case for bringing Evergreen into the Wilson Group family, one that could have benefited both entities if approached properly, through negotiation, fair valuation, and transparent terms. Which is not what happened. No, it's not. Robert set down his cup and leaned forward. Jessica, I've followed your career since before you married Andrew. Your approach to financial consulting is genuinely impressive, adaptive, client-focused, technologically innovative. In many ways, it represents the future of our industry, while Wilson Group has remained perhaps too anchored in traditional models. The compliment seemed sincere, which made this conversation all the more surreal. Thank you, but that doesn't change our current situation. It doesn't, he agreed. But it does suggest a potential path forward that might serve everyone's interests better than protracted legal battles and public accusations. Here it was, the real purpose of this meeting. I'm listening. A true partnership between Evergreen and Wilson Group, not an acquisition or absorption, but a strategic alliance with clearly defined boundaries and mutual benefits. You maintain full ownership and control of Evergreen. We establish proper firewalls between the companies while creating structured collaboration opportunities. Any client referrals or shared services operate under transparent agreements with fair compensation. The proposal wasn't entirely unreasonable on its face. A strategic partnership with Wilson Group, if it were an ethically run organization with stable finances, could potentially benefit Evergreen in certain markets. And what does Wilson Group get from this arrangement? I asked. Association with Evergreen's innovative approaches. Access to your expertise in areas where we've lagged behind industry developments. And, he hesitated briefly, an opportunity to rebuild damaged trust without public disclosure of internal financial challenges that could trigger a client exodus. There it was. What Robert really wanted was for me to help the Wilson Group save face to prevent the public and regulatory scrutiny that would come from exposing what Andrew and Daniel had attempted. That's a significant ask, given what's happened, I observed. It is, Robert acknowledged. But consider the alternatives. Litigation will be expensive and time-consuming for both sides. Even if you prevail completely, which is far from certain given the complexities involved, the process will distract you from growing Evergreen and serving your clients. Meanwhile, public allegations about Wilson Group's financial position, whether fully substantiated or not, could trigger a systemic reaction in Portland's financial community. The fallout would extend well beyond our two companies. He wasn't wrong about the potential broader impacts. Financial institutions depended on trust and stability. If Wilson Investment Group collapsed amid allegations of fraud and insolvency, it could create ripple effects throughout the regional financial ecosystem, potentially affecting other institutions and clients. What about Andrew? I asked. Any partnership would require ongoing interaction. After what's happened, that seems untenable. Robert's expression softened slightly. Your marriage to Andrew is a separate matter from any business arrangement. I won't presume to advise you on personal decisions. But professionally, Andrew could be recused from any direct involvement with Evergreen matters within such a partnership structure. I took a moment to consider Robert's proposal. It offered certain practical advantages over continued conflict, particularly if Wilson Group's financial position was as precarious as my evidence suggested. A controlled resolution might indeed be better for the broader financial community than a messy public implosion. But it also required me to set aside the fundamental breach of trust that had occurred, to continue professional association with people who had attempted to steal my company and livelihood. I appreciate your directness, I said finally. And I understand the case you're making for a negotiated resolution. But before I could consider any such arrangement, I would need several non-negotiable conditions met. Robert nodded. Such as? Complete reversal of all unauthorized transfers. Return of any client assets or relationships improperly moved to Wilson entities. A formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing signed by Andrew and Daniel. Financial restitution for damages to Evergreen's business operations and reputation. And complete. Transparency regarding Wilson Group's current financial position, verified by an independent auditor of my choosing. Robert's expression remained neutral, but I saw him calculating the implications of each demand. Those are substantial requirements. They reflect the substantial nature of what was attempted, I replied. Trust has been broken, Robert. Rebuilding. It, if that's even possible, requires extraordinary measures. I understand. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small flash drive, placing it on the table between us. This contains detailed financial records for Wilson Investment Group's main accounts and investment positions. Not everything, but enough to verify the general situation I've described. Consider it a good faith gesture toward the transparency you're requesting. The drive represented potentially valuable intelligence, confirmation of what I had already suspected about Wilson Group's financial troubles. But it could also be carefully curated information designed to support Robert's narrative. I'll have my team review it, I said, taking the drive. But I need time to consider everything we've discussed. This isn't a decision I can make immediately, especially without consulting with my legal counsel. Of course, take 48 hours, Robert suggested. But Jessica, his voice took on a note of urgency, this window for an amicable resolution won't remain open indefinitely. If this becomes a public battle with regulatory involvement, certain paths forward will close permanently. As I left the Arlington Club, my mind was racing with the implications of Robert's proposal and the information he had shared. The revelation about his health added a new dimension to the family dynamics I had observed. If Robert was indeed stepping back from leadership, it explained Patricia's increased focus on securing the Wilson legacy through Andrew and Daniel. I called Mark Henderson from my car, summarizing the meeting and Robert's proposal. It's an interesting offer, Mark said after I finished. But I'd be extremely cautious. The Wilsons are in damage control mode now. They'll say whatever they think will de-escalate the situation. I know. I have no intention of simply accepting Robert's characterization of events or his proposal. But having their financial data could be valuable regardless of what we decide to do next. Absolutely. Send me the drive. I'll have our forensic accountants analyze it immediately. They'll be able to determine if it contains legitimate information or a carefully constructed narrative. What about his claim that Andrew and Daniel acted without his knowledge? Is that plausible? Mark considered this. Possible, especially if he has been stepping back due to health issues. But even if true, it doesn't necessarily change our legal position. The Wilson Group would still bear corporate responsibility for the actions of its officers. After hanging up, I drove directly to Evergreen's offices. Despite it being Sunday, I found several team members already there, continuing our emergency response efforts. Alicia met me at the door. How did it go with Robert Wilson? She asked, having been briefed on the meeting beforehand. Interesting, I replied. He's offering a partnership rather than continued conflict, but with significant strings attached. He also provided some financial data that might give us better insight into Wilson Group's true position. I handed her the flash drive. Have our security team check this for any malware before we access it. Then get it to the forensic accountants. I want to know if what Robert told me about their financial situation matches reality. For the rest of Sunday, we continued preparing for what promised to be a crucial week ahead. The deadline Andrew had given, end of business Monday, loomed over our planning. But with each hour that passed, I felt increasingly confident in our position. Our client outreach was showing positive results. Our legal strategy was sound. And most importantly, we had evidence on our side. By Sunday evening, we had preliminary results from the analysis of Robert's flash drive. The data appeared legitimate and confirmed what I had suspected. Wilson Investment Group had suffered significant losses on several major investment positions. They weren't technically insolvent yet, but their capital reserves were dangerously low, and several major clients had already begun quietly reducing their exposure. This information strengthened my resolve. The Wilsons weren't just after Evergreen's client relationships and expertise. They needed my company's assets to shore up their deteriorating financial position. What Andrew and Daniel had attempted wasn't merely an aggressive business maneuver. It was a desperate attempt to save their family legacy at my expense. As I prepared to return to my hotel for the night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just a few days. The marriage and family connections I had worked so hard to maintain had been revealed as fundamentally flawed. The professional respect I thought I had earned from the Wilsons had been exposed as a facade masking their true intentions. Yet amidst this painful unraveling, I found myself standing more firmly in my own power than ever before. The Jessica, who had entered the Wilson family orbit, seeking validation and acceptance, had been replaced by someone who understood her own worth and was prepared to fight for what she had built. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. Monday morning arrived with the distinct atmosphere of impending confrontation. I woke in my hotel suite before dawn, reviewing strategy notes and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a defining day in this conflict. By the time I arrived at Evergreen's offices at 7 a.m., 3 voice messages from Andrew had already accumulated on my blocked number. Each marked urgent, none listened to. The office was unusually active for such an early hour. Our core response team had been working around the clock since Saturday, coordinating client communications, documenting every development, and preparing for various contingency scenarios. Alicia met me at the elevator, tablet in hand, already, briefing me on overnight developments. 2 more Wilson Group clients contacted us requesting meetings, she reported as we walked toward my office. Both major accounts, the Ferndale Trust and Horizon Ventures. Did they indicate why they're reaching out? I asked, knowing that client movement at this stage could significantly influence the outcome of our standoff. Concerns about their portfolios after hearing rumors about Wilson Group's financial position, Alicia replied. The Ferndale trustee specifically mentioned unusual account activity they'd questioned last month, but were assured was routine rebalancing. That matched the pattern we were seeing. Questionable transactions within Wilson Group that extended beyond just their attempt to appropriate Evergreen. I made a mental note to have our team carefully document this conversation with Ferndale. It could prove valuable if regulatory authorities became involved. What about the flash drive Robert Wilson provided? Any updates from the forensic team? Alicia handed me a preliminary report. It appears to contain legitimate financial data, though potentially curated to support Robert's narrative. The analysts identified several concerning patterns. Leveraged, positions significantly beyond what's disclosed in Wilson Group's public filings, concentration risks in specific market sectors, and what looks like creative accounting to mask underperforming investments. Do they assess risk of immediate insolvency? Not immediate, Alicia said. But they've identified a vulnerability to any significant market downturn or mass client withdrawals. If even 15% of their clients pulled their assets simultaneously, she didn't need to finish the thought. A 15% client exodus would trigger exactly the kind of liquidity crisis that could collapse Wilson Investment Group, and likely what Andrew and Daniel had been desperately trying to prevent by seizing Evergreen's stable client base and assets. What about our security posture? I asked, changing topics. Any further contact from the Wilsons or their representatives? Nothing direct, but our IT team detected several attempted access events overnight. Someone using expired credentials trying to log into our client management systems. The attempts came from IP addresses associated with Wilson Group offices. This suggested desperation on their part, trying to regain access to systems and data they had previously controlled through their accounting integration with Evergreen. It reinforced my decision to completely sever all technical connections between our companies as part of Operation Clean Slate. Make sure everything is documented for our legal team, I instructed. Those access attempts could be interpreted as continued efforts to misappropriate our data. At 8:30 a.m., Mark Henderson called with an update on our legal position. The emergency injunction is holding, he reported. Judge Winters denied the Wilson Group's request for an immediate hearing to challenge it. They'll have to wait until Wednesday for a formal review. That buys us valuable time, I noted. Exactly. And I've just received confirmation that the SEC has opened a preliminary inquiry based on the documentation we provided. They're moving cautiously given the Wilson Group's prominence, but the evidence of forged authorizations was compelling enough to warrant investigation. This was significant. Regulatory involvement raised the stakes considerably for the Wilsons. While it increased the pressure on them, it also potentially reduced the likelihood of an amicable resolution. Once regulators became involved, certain paths forward closed permanently, just as Robert had warned. What about Andrew's deadline? I asked. End of business today. What should we expect? Mark's tone remained measured. Most likely, they'll file for an emergency restraining order to prevent further client communications from Evergreen regarding Wilson Group. They may also initiate civil proceedings alleging business defamation, breach of confidentiality agreements, or interference with business relationships. All predictable, I said, and defensible given our evidence. Defensible, yes, but still requiring response and resources. My team is prepared for each scenario. We've also taken the precaution of preparing counterfilings alleging fraud, corporate theft, and breach of fiduciary duty that can be submitted immediately if they initiate legal action. After finishing with Mark, I joined a conference call with our crisis communications consultant, a former financial journalist who specialized in helping firms navigate reputational challenges. She had been monitoring media coverage and industry chatter since Saturday. The story is starting to gain traction in financial circles, she reported. Nothing mainstream yet, but the Portland Business Journal is preparing a piece, and several industry blogs have mentioned unusual activities at Wilson Group. The family's connections have likely suppressed some coverage, but they can't contain it entirely. What's our best approach? I asked. Maintain the narrative of protecting client interests and financial integrity. Position Evergreen as the responsible party that identified and addressed improper activities. Avoid direct accusations that could appear vindictive or personal. Let the facts and documentation speak for themselves. Her advice aligned with my instincts. This wasn't about my failed marriage or personal grievances against the Wilsons. It was about upholding financial ethics and protecting what I had built from improper appropriation. Keeping that focus would serve us best in both the industry and regulatory arenas. At 10:15 a.m., Taylor knocked on my office door. Jessica, Benjamin Winters is on line 1. He says it's urgent. This call could be pivotal. The Winters family's decision about their relationship with both Evergreen and Wilson Group would likely influence other major clients. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Benjamin, good morning. Jessica. His voice was direct as always. We've completed our review of the materials you provided, along with our own independent assessment of both Evergreen and Wilson Group. I appreciate your thoroughness, I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite my anxiety about his decision. Given what we've found, we've made 2 decisions. First, we're moving our family's accounts from Wilson Group, effective immediately. The concentration risks and leveraged positions we identified in their portfolio management approach are inconsistent with our conservative investment philosophy. This was significant. The Winters family had been with Wilson Group for over 40 years. Their departure would send shockwaves through Portland's financial community. Second, Benjamin continued, We'd like to transfer those accounts to Evergreen. Financial, subject to a detailed review of your investment approach for our specific needs. Catherine was impressed with your transparent handling of this situation and believes your firm's analytical methods align better with our current objectives. I had hoped for the Winters family to at least maintain confidence in Evergreen, but this exceeded my expectations. Their complete exit from Wilson Group and potential transfer to Evergreen represented not just a vote of confidence but a substantial business opportunity. "We'd be honored to work with your family, Benjamin," I replied, "and I appreciate your trust during this challenging period." "Trust is earned through actions, not words," he said. "Your response to discovering improprieties demonstrated integrity. That matters more to us than decades of social connections. Catherine will contact your team this afternoon to begin the transition process." After the call ended, I sat quietly, for a moment, processing the implications. The Winters family's decision would almost certainly trigger responses from other Wilson Group clients. If similar high-net-worth families followed their lead, it could accelerate the very liquidity crisis that Robert had feared. I needed to decide whether this development changed my calculus regarding Robert's partnership proposal. On one hand, Evergreen's position was strengthening by the hour. The vindication of having a prominent family like the Winters choose us over Wilson Group would enhance our reputation and potentially bring significant new business. Fighting from a position of increasing strength was tempting. On the other hand, a partnership that prevented the complete collapse of Wilson Group might still serve the broader financial ecosystem better than a messy public implosion. And despite everything that had happened, I couldn't ignore the potential. Collateral damage to innocent employees and clients if Wilson Group failed spectacularly. Before I could reach any conclusion, Taylor appeared at my door again. "Patricia Wilson is in reception," she announced, her expression suggesting she was as surprised by this visit as I was. "She's insisting on seeing you immediately." Patricia's appearance was unexpected. After our confrontation on Saturday, I had assumed any further Wilson family approaches would come through Andrew or their attorneys. For Patricia to come personally, especially without an appointment, suggested either desperation or a significant new development. "Have security escort her to the small conference room," I instructed, "and ask Alicia to join us." 5 minutes. Later, I entered the conference room to find Patricia Wilson sitting rigidly at the table, her Hermes handbag placed precisely before her, her expression betraying none of the anxiety that must have brought her to Evergreen's offices unannounced. "Patricia, this is unexpected," I said, taking a seat across from her with Alicia beside me. "I thought we had concluded our discussions on Saturday." "Circumstances have evolved," she replied, her voice controlled as always. "The Winters family has informed us of their decision to terminate their relationship with Wilson Group." So, that was it. The Winters had already notified them. "I'm aware of their decision," I acknowledged, "though I'm surprised they communicated it to you so quickly." "Benjamin Winters and Robert have been friends for 40 years, Patricia said, a hint of bitterness entering her tone. "He had the courtesy to call personally rather than having his staff deliver the news." I waited, sensing there was more to this visit than simply confirming information I already knew. "You've won this round, Jessica," Patricia continued after a moment. "I'm here to discuss terms for a ceasefire before this conflict destroys both companies and damages the broader financial community." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my expression neutral despite my surprise at her apparent capitulation. Patricia reached into her handbag and withdrew a document folder. "Robert has convinced me that a negotiated resolution is preferable to continued public conflict. These are the terms we're prepared to accept." She slid the folder across the table. I opened it to find a typed proposal outlining conditions remarkably similar to those I had stated to Robert the previous day. Complete reversal of all unauthorized transfers, formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, financial restitution for damages, to Evergreen, and a framework for limited, transparent collaboration moving forward. "This represents a significant shift from your position on Saturday," I observed, scanning the document carefully for hidden traps or qualifications. Saturday, I was operating with incomplete information, Patricia admitted, her composure cracking. Slightly. I wasn't fully aware of Andrew and Daniel's actions regarding Evergreen, nor of the extent of Wilson Group's financial challenges. This admission surprised me. Had Robert kept Patricia in the dark about the company's true financial position? Or was this another tactical approach, positioning Patricia as an innocent party in what had occurred? Robert shared everything with me last night, she continued, answering my unspoken question, including his health situation and the unauthorized actions our sons took. What they did was… She hesitated, seemingly struggling to acknowledge the reality. Wrong. Legally and ethically wrong. Coming from Patricia Wilson, who had spent years subtly undermining my professional standing and treating Evergreen as an amusing side project rather than a serious financial enterprise, this acknowledgement was astonishing. Why the change of heart? I asked directly. 2 days ago, you were defending their actions as standard business practice and suggesting I was being vindictive. Patricia's perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly on the table. Because I've seen the financial reports Robert had been keeping from me, because 3 more major clients called this morning after hearing about the Winters family's decision, because the SEC has contacted our compliance department requesting extensive documentation. She paused, meeting my eyes directly, and because despite what you may think of me, Jessica, I do care about the legacy my family has built over generations. I don't want it destroyed by my son's poor judgment. Her candor seemed genuine, which made this conversation all the more surreal. For years, Patricia had been the primary architect of my exclusion from the Wilson inner circle, maintaining a facade of acceptance while never truly recognizing me as an equal. Now she was sitting in my office, acknowledging wrongdoing and essentially asking for terms. The proposal mentions an acknowledgement of wrongdoing from Andrew and Daniel, I noted. Do they support this offer? A flicker of discomfort crossed Patricia's face. Daniel has recognized the severity of the situation and agreed to these terms. Andrew is still processing the implications. Meaning he doesn't agree, I translated. He believes there's still a path to victory through legal channels, Patricia admitted. Robert and I disagree. The evidence you've assembled is too substantial, and the potential damage from prolonged public conflict too severe. This internal division within the Wilson family was interesting and potentially valuable information. If Andrew was operating against his parents' wishes, it could further isolate him and weaken the Wilson Group's unified front. I appreciate your directness, Patricia, I said after studying the proposal further. And I'm willing to consider these terms as a starting point for discussion. However, I'll need to review this with my legal counsel before providing a formal response. Of course, she replied. We've authorized our attorneys to begin preparing the necessary documentation for the transfers and acknowledgments outlined. In the proposal, they can work directly with your legal team on the details. As our meeting concluded, Patricia rose to leave, but paused before reaching the door. Jessica, I know my words likely carry little weight given our history, but for whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for what Andrew and Daniel attempted to do to your company, but for my own role in making you feel less than fully accepted within our family. The apology was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't formulate a response. Was this genuine remorse or simply another tactical move in a family known for strategic social maneuvers? Thank you for saying that, I finally replied, choosing measured acceptance over skepticism or rejection. It means something to hear it, even under these circumstances. After Patricia left, Alicia and I reviewed the proposal in detail, identifying potential issues and areas requiring clarification or strengthening. The terms were surprisingly favorable to Evergreen, perhaps reflecting just how precarious Wilson Group's position had become in the wake of the Winters family's departure. Do you think they're serious? Alicia asked. This feels almost too accommodating given how aggressively they were moving against us just days ago. I think their situation deteriorated faster than they anticipated, I replied. The Winters' decision to leave probably triggered concerns from other major clients. If several large accounts started withdrawing simultaneously, it could create exactly the liquidity crisis they were trying to prevent by taking over Evergreen. Alicia finished the thought. Exactly, which means we need to move carefully. If Wilson Group collapses completely, it could create broader market disruption that ultimately harms our clients too. I forwarded the proposal to Mark Henderson for legal review, then spent the next hour on a conference call with our leadership team, briefing them on these developments and discussing next steps. Throughout the conversation, I emphasized that while the Wilson proposal offered a potential resolution, we needed to maintain all protective measures and continue operating as if litigation remained likely. Trust but verify, Marcus commented, especially given their previous actions. Precisely, I agreed. We proceed with appropriate caution while exploring this potential off-ramp from direct conflict. By early afternoon, Mark had completed his initial review of the Wilson proposal. From a legal perspective, it addresses most of our core concerns, he reported. The reversal of asset transfers, formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and financial restitution are all clearly stated. The proposed collaboration framework is appropriately limited and includes the transparency safeguards we'd want. Any concerns? Or red flags? I asked. 2 areas need strengthening, he replied. First, the proposal is vague about who specifically signs the acknowledgement of wrongdoing. We should insist on signatures from Andrew, Daniel, Robert, and Patricia individually, as well as in their corporate capacities. I nodded, making notes. And the second concern? The section on future non-interference needs more explicit language. As written, it doesn't adequately prevent them from attempting to influence Evergreen clients through indirect channels or third parties. Can you draft the necessary revisions? Already working on it, Mark confirmed. I should have them to you within the hour. Once you approve, we can present the counter-proposal to their legal team. As promised, Mark's revisions arrived promptly. The changes strengthened our position without fundamentally altering the framework Patricia had presented. After reviewing them carefully and making a few additional notes, I authorized Mark to proceed with the counter-proposal. Throughout this process, a question kept surfacing in my mind. Where was Andrew? His absence from these negotiations was conspicuous, especially given Patricia's comment about him still believing in a path to victory through legal channels. Was he planning some counter-move that his parents weren't aware of, or had chosen not to share with me? My answer came at 4:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before his self-imposed deadline of end of business Monday. Taylor appeared at my office. Her expression tense. Andrew is here with 2 men who identified themselves as attorneys. They're insisting on delivering legal documents personally. So Andrew had chosen to proceed with litigation despite his parents' negotiation efforts. It was a bold move, and potentially a desperate one if he was acting without the full support of the Wilson family. Have security escort them to the main conference room, I instructed, and ask Mark Henderson to join us by phone immediately. When I entered the conference room, Andrew stood at the far end, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits carrying legal briefcases. His appearance had deteriorated further since our Saturday meeting, his normally immaculate appearance now showing clear signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his suit was rumpled, and he had missed a spot shaving. Jessica, he began, his tone artificially formal. These are Howard Levinson and James Park from Levinson, Park & Associates. They're here to serve you with legal notices regarding your actions against Wilson Investment Group. I nodded acknowledgement to the attorneys, but addressed Andrew directly. Interesting timing, considering I've just concluded discussions with your mother about a negotiated resolution to this situation. Andrew's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened. Whatever discussions you may have had with my mother are irrelevant. She doesn't speak for Wilson Investment Group in legal matters. Really? I was under the impression that Robert Wilson, as chairman and CEO, had authorized those discussions, and the proposal your mother delivered. One of the attorneys, Levinson, I presumed from his older appearance, glanced at Andrew with a hint of confusion. Mr. Wilson, you indicated your firm's leadership was unified in pursuing these legal remedies. They are, Andrew insisted quickly. My parents are exploring alternative approaches as a contingency, but the official position of Wilson Investment Group is represented in these filings. The situation was becoming clear. Andrew was proceeding with litigation without full family support or possibly even against direct instructions from his parents. It was a reckless move that suggested either desperation or a significant break within the Wilson hierarchy. In any case, Andrew continued, nodding to the attorneys, we're here to serve notice of legal action for corporate defamation, breach of confidentiality, interference with business relationships, and misappropriation of proprietary information. Levinson opened his briefcase and removed a thick document folder. Ms. Wilson, these papers outline the complaints being filed against you personally and Evergreen Financial as a corporate entity. They include a request for emergency injunctive relief to cease all communications regarding Wilson Investment, Group to clients or other third parties. I didn't take the offered documents. I'll have my attorney accept service. He should be joining us momentarily. On cue, the conference room phone rang. I activated the speaker. Mark, I have Andrew Wilson here with attorneys Howard Levinson and James Park. They're attempting to serve legal notices against me and Evergreen. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mark's voice came clearly through the speaker. I'll accept service. On behalf of Ms. Wilson and Evergreen Financial. However, before proceeding, I should inform you that we have just received written confirmation from Robert Wilson, as chairman and CEO of Wilson Investment Group, authorizing a negotiated settlement along the lines proposed earlier today. This communication explicitly directs all Wilson Group representatives to cease litigation activities pending completion of these negotiations. Andrew's face drained of color. That's not possible. My father wouldn't. I've forwarded the communication to your email, Mr. Levinson, Mark continued. I suggest you review it with your client before proceeding with any filings that might contradict the express directions of Wilson Group's chief executive. Levinson and Park exchanged uncomfortable glances before the older attorney removed his phone to check his email. After a moment of scrolling, his expression became troubled. Mr. Wilson, there does appear to be an email from your father to Wilson Group's general counsel explicitly directing a halt to all litigation against Ms. Wilson and Evergreen pending settlement negotiations. It's copied to several board members. Andrew snatched the phone, reading the email with increasing agitation. This isn't, he can't. He stopped, visibly struggling to maintain composure. I need to speak with my father immediately. This has to be a misunderstanding. While you sort out your internal communications, I'll accept those documents, Mark said through the speaker. Although I should note that filing them against the express direction of your client's CEO could potentially create ethical issues for your firm. This was clearly not how Andrew had expected this confrontation to unfold. He had arrived believing he held the power to intimidate me with legal threats, only to discover his own authority had been undermined by his parents' parallel actions. We'll need to confer with our client regarding these developments, Levinson stated professionally, returning the documents to his briefcase. Given the apparent conflict in direction from Wilson Group leadership, we'll postpone any filings until the situation is clarified. Andrew's expression had transformed from confident aggression to barely contained fury. This isn't over, Jessica, he said, his voice low. My parents are making a mistake. There won't be any settlement. That's not your decision to make anymore, is it? I replied calmly. But I'm curious. What did you think would happen today? Did you genuinely believe legal threats would make me return Evergreen to your control after discovering what you tried to do? What I did was protect a family legacy from your inexperience and limited vision. Andrew snapped, his composure finally breaking. Evergreen would have thrived under proper Wilson management, instead of remaining the boutique operation you've insisted on maintaining. His condescension even now was astounding. Despite overwhelming evidence that his actions had been both illegal and ethically indefensible, Andrew still believed himself justified. Still saw me as somehow inadequate despite building a successful financial consultancy that his family had tried to appropriate precisely because of its value. "I think we're done here," I said, standing. "Your attorneys seem to understand the situation better than you do. I suggest you speak with your parents about next steps." As security escorted them from the building, I returned to my office and called Robert Wilson directly. He answered immediately, suggesting he had been waiting for my call. "I assume Andrew has made his move," he said without preamble. "He just left my office after attempting to serve legal notices," I confirmed. "Your email to Wilson Group's counsel arrived with excellent timing." Robert sighed audibly. "I anticipated something like this. Andrew has always been determined once he sets a course. Unfortunately, in this situation, his determination has become detrimental to everyone's interests. He seems to believe he's acting to protect Wilson Group, despite your directives to the contrary. What Andrew fails to understand is that the landscape has shifted," Robert replied. "With the Winters family's departure and SEC interest in our operations, the strategy of aggressive legal action against you would only accelerate our challenges, not resolve them. Does this mean you're fully committed to the negotiated resolution Patricia presented today?" "I am," Robert affirmed. "And so is Patricia, despite her initial reluctance. The board has been briefed on the situation and supports this approach. As well, Andrew is effectively isolated in his opposition." This was valuable confirmation that the Wilson proposal represented their official position, not merely a tactical diversion while Andrew pursued litigation. It strengthened my confidence in proceeding with settlement negotiations rather than preparing for extended legal conflict. "What about Daniel?" I asked, noting the absence of the other Wilson son from these discussions. "Daniel recognizes the severity of the situation he helped create," Robert said. "He'll sign the acknowledgement of wrongdoing and accept whatever professional consequences follow. Unlike Andrew, he prioritizes the survival of Wilson Group over his pride." After concluding my call with Robert, I updated Mark on the conversation and confirmed we should proceed with our counterproposal. The day's developments had shifted the dynamic significantly in our favor. What had begun as a desperate fight to save my company from theft had transformed into a negotiation where Evergreen held the stronger position. As evening fell, I found myself alone in my office, reflecting on the remarkable series of events that had brought me to this point. Just 4 days earlier, I had been in Napa Valley, discovering the audit trail that revealed my husband's betrayal. Now I was negotiating the terms of a settlement that would not only preserve Evergreen's independence, but potentially reshape the financial landscape of our region. The Wilson family that had once seemed so impenetrable, so untouchable in their generational wealth and influence, had been revealed as vulnerable, not just financially but in the fault lines that ran through their relationships with each other. Patricia's apology, Robert's health challenges, the brothers' divergent responses to crisis, all painted a picture of a family facade cracking under pressure. And through it all, I had discovered strengths in myself I hadn't fully recognized before. Resilience in the face of betrayal, strategic thinking under extreme pressure, and the ability to stand firm when everything familiar was falling away. The Jessica who had once sought the Wilsons' approval now understood she had never needed it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Just saw the news about Winters leaving Wilson Group. Sounds like you're winning. Dinner to celebrate?" I smiled at her characteristic directness. "Not quite victory yet," I texted back. "But definitely progress. Rain check on dinner? Still work to do tonight." "Tomorrow, then," Sam replied. "You're a badass, Jess. Always knew it. even when you were trying to impress those Wilson snobs. Her unwavering support reminded me of the authentic relationships I'd maintained outside the Wilson orbit. Friendships based on genuine connection rather than social calculation or financial interest. These would be the foundations upon which I rebuilt my personal life once the professional battles were resolved. Turning back to my computer, I opened the settlement counter proposal Mark had prepared and began my final review. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in implementing whatever agreement we reached. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction in having protected what I had built, not just for myself, but for everyone who had trusted in my vision for Evergreen Financial. The audit trail I had discovered in Napa Valley had indeed changed everything, revealing painful truths but also opening the path to a future built on integrity rather than illusion. For that unexpected gift of clarity, I was surprisingly grateful. 6 months later, I stood in Evergreen Financial's newly expanded offices, gazing out at the Portland skyline as the autumn sun cast golden light across the Willamette River. The view from our new executive floor was spectacular, a fitting symbol of how far we'd come since those tumultuous days in May. "The Thompson Group representatives are here," Taylor announced, interrupting my moment of reflection. "They're waiting in the main conference room." "Thank you. Let them know I'll be right there." Before heading to the meeting, I paused to straighten a framed article on my office wall, the Portland Business Journal's cover story titled "Rebuilding Trust: How Evergreen Financial Transformed Portland's Financial Landscape." The piece had chronicled our company's journey from near disaster to industry leadership, highlighting the ethical stand that had ultimately strengthened our position in the market. The settlement with the Wilson family had been finalized within 2 weeks of that confrontational Monday. The terms largely followed our counter-proposal: complete reversal of all unauthorized transfers, substantial financial restitution, a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing signed by all Wilson principals, yes, even Andrew, eventually, and a limited, collaborative framework that maintained Evergreen's complete independence. What the settlement couldn't address was the personal fallout. Andrew and I had begun divorce proceedings immediately, with a separation agreement that reflected the reality that our marriage had been irreparably damaged. The process was surprisingly civil, perhaps because Andrew had finally recognized the futility of further conflict, or perhaps because the public humiliation of what had transpired had diminished his characteristic combativeness. Wilson Investment Group had survived, though in a significantly restructured form. Robert had accelerated his retirement plans, transitioning leadership to external financial management experts rather than family members. Daniel had stepped away from direct client management, taking a reduced role focused on internal operations. And most surprisingly, Patricia had emerged as a stabilizing public face for the firm, drawing on her social connections to rebuild client trust. As for Andrew, he had left Portland entirely. Last I heard, he had taken a position with a financial firm in Chicago, far from the shadow of both the Wilson family legacy and the story of how his attempted corporate theft had backfired so spectacularly. The path forward hadn't been entirely smooth for Evergreen either. The industry scrutiny that followed the public revelation of what had occurred created challenges of its own. Some potential clients were hesitant to engage with a firm that had been at the center of such controversy. Regulatory oversight intensified, requiring additional compliance measures and documentation. But the benefits had ultimately outweighed these obstacles. Evergreen's reputation for ethical integrity had attracted clients who valued transparency and independent financial advice. Our team had grown from 28 to 42 professionals, necessitating the move to larger offices. And most significantly, the crisis had clarified our corporate identity and values in ways that marketing consultants could spend years trying to achieve. I entered the conference room to find the Thompson Group executives, representatives of one of the largest family offices on the West Coast, reviewing our presentation materials. They had been Wilson Group clients for decades until the events of May prompted them to reconsider their financial relationships. "Good morning," I greeted them. Thank you for making time to explore how Evergreen might serve your family's needs. The meeting progressed smoothly through our tailored presentation. When we reached the section on corporate governance and client protections, James Thompson, the family patriarch, raised his hand. Jessica, let's address the elephant in the room. Your company's history with Wilson Group is well known. What specific changes have you implemented to ensure something similar could never happen to Evergreen, and by extension, to your client's assets? It was a fair question, one we had anticipated and prepared for thoroughly. 3 specific structural changes, I replied. First, we've implemented a distributed authorization system that prevents any single individual, including me, from making significant changes to client account structures without multiple independent approvals. Second, we've established a client governance committee that includes external fiduciary experts who review all major operational decisions. And third, we've created complete transparency in our audit trail systems, allowing clients real-time visibility into any transactions affecting their accounts. I continued. But beyond these technical safeguards, there's something more fundamental. Our experience has transformed how we approach client relationships entirely. We understand viscerally that trust must be continuously earned through actions, not just promised through words. James nodded, satisfied with the response. Experience can be the most expensive but effective teacher. As the meeting concluded, and the Thompson team departed with promises of further discussions, Alicia joined me in gathering our materials. That went well, she observed. James seemed particularly engaged during the portfolio strategy discussion. I think we have a good chance with them, I agreed. Their investment philosophy aligns closely with our approach. We walked together toward my office, discussing the day's remaining agenda. Alicia had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer in our company restructuring, recognition of both her loyalty during the crisis and her exceptional management capabilities. By the way, she said, pausing at my door, Sam called earlier. She wanted to confirm dinner tonight at Luciana's. I smiled at the mention. Sam had been relentless in ensuring I maintained some semblance of personal life during the intensive rebuilding period. Tonight's dinner was to celebrate the finalization of my divorce, not with sadness, but as marking the definitive close of that chapter. Tell her I'm looking forward to it, I replied, and that she better not have arranged any surprise blind dates this time. Alicia laughed. No promises. She seemed suspiciously enthusiastic. After she left, I returned to my desk to find an envelope that hadn't been there earlier. Inside was a handwritten note on Wilson Group stationery. Jessica, I've been meaning to write for some time. Robert's condition has worsened faster than expected, and will be moving to Arizona next month, to be near specialized care facilities. Before leaving Portland, I wanted to acknowledge something important. What you built with Evergreen deserved respect, not appropriation. The strength you showed in defending it deserved admiration, not opposition. I regret that it took such extreme circumstances for me to recognize these truths. Our family has paid a significant price for the actions taken against you and your company, but perhaps that price has purchased wisdom we sorely needed. Daniel has finally found purpose in rebuilding our firm's ethical foundations. Robert has made peace with a legacy that will continue differently than he imagined. And I have learned belatedly to value character above status. I don't expect forgiveness or renewed connection. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But I did want you to know that your example has changed more than just Portland's financial landscape. Wishing you continued success, Patricia Wilson. I read the note twice, surprised by Patricia's candor. There had been no communication between us since the settlement was finalized, and I had assumed there never would be. This unexpected reflection prompted my own. The past 6 months had been focused almost exclusively on professional rebuilding, strengthening Evergreen, serving our clients, implementing new safeguards. The personal dimensions of what had occurred had been largely set aside, compartmentalized. as I concentrated on the business challenges at hand. Patricia's note served as a reminder that beneath the corporate conflict had been personal relationships, however flawed. A marriage that had begun with genuine hope. A family I had tried to join, despite never quite belonging. People whose lives had been permanently altered by the choices we had all made. I placed the note in my desk drawer rather than discarding it, not because I anticipated any renewed connection with the Wilsons, but because it represented an unexpected closing of the circle. Acknowledgement from the woman who had once deemed me fundamentally unsuitable that I had proven my worth in ways she hadn't anticipated. As the afternoon progressed, I finalized preparations for a presentation to the Oregon Financial Advisors Association the following week. I had been invited to speak about ethical challenges in wealth management, an ironic opportunity that had emerged from our very public ordeal. The industry was beginning to recognize that Evergreen's experience offered valuable lessons for other firms navigating the complex intersection of family wealth, corporate governance, and professional ethics. At 5:30, I gathered my things to leave for dinner with Sam. As I passed through our main workspace, I noticed several team members gathered around Marcus's desk, engaged in animated discussion about a client portfolio strategy. Their energy and commitment remained one of the most rewarding aspects of rebuilding Evergreen. The shared sense of purpose that had emerged from successfully defending our company's independence. "Don't stay too late," I called to them with a smile. "The markets will still be there tomorrow." Outside, the autumn air was crisp as I walked to my car. 6 months earlier, I had driven away from the Napa Valley restaurant in a rental car. My future uncertain, my marriage unraveling, my company under threat. Now I moved through the world differently, more confident in my judgment, more clear about my priorities, more appreciative of genuine relationships. The audit trail I had discovered that night had indeed changed everything, but not in the way Andrew and Daniel had intended. Rather than destroying what I had built, their actions had ultimately strengthened it. Rather than diminishing my professional standing, the conflict had enhanced it. Rather than leaving me isolated, the crisis had revealed who truly stood with me when everything was at risk. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Got us the corner table. Wearing your new dress or still in work mode?" I smiled at her gentle nudging to embrace life beyond the office. "Work clothes," I texted back, but bringing heels to change into baby steps. "Progress," she replied with a laughing emoji. Driving through downtown Portland toward the restaurant, I passed the Wilson Investment Group building, still standing, still operating, though with a notably different energy than before. The crisis that had nearly destroyed both our companies had ultimately transformed them instead. Evergreen had emerged stronger, more resilient, with a clearer sense of purpose. Wilson Group had been forced to reckon with fundamental flaws in its governance and culture, emerging humbled, but perhaps healthier. The financial community of Portland had changed too. The incident had prompted other family-owned firms to examine their succession plans and governance structures. Clients had become more attentive to the details of how their assets were managed and protected. Regulatory oversight had intensified across the industry. The ripple effects extended far beyond our two companies. As I pulled into the restaurant parking lot, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me had weathered a storm that might have broken someone with less resilience or less support. The experience had left its marks, a certain wariness in my eyes that hadn't been there before, perhaps, but it had also revealed strengths I hadn't fully recognized in myself. Sam waved enthusiastically from the restaurant entrance, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "There she is," she called as I approached. "The financial maverick of the Pacific Northwest." I laughed, accepting both the champagne and her exuberant hug. "Hardly a maverick, just someone who refused to be pushed around." "Which makes you practically revolutionary in your industry," Sam countered. "Now come on. We have a divorce to celebrate and a future to toast to." As we entered the restaurant, I realized that despite everything that had happened, the betrayal, the conflict, the restructuring, I felt genuinely optimistic about that future. Not because the path forward was perfectly clear or without challenges, but because I now knew with certainty that I could navigate whatever came next. The audit trail that had exposed Andrew and Daniel's scheme had revealed more than just financial fraud. It had illuminated the true nature of relationships I had invested in, clarified values I would not compromise, and ultimately showed me the power of standing firmly in my own truth. That was worth raising a glass to, not the ending of my marriage, or the victory over the Wilsons, but the beginning of a new chapter written entirely on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.